What I suspect is happening here is that there has become increasing cynicism about vaccines more broadly, and perhaps the medical establishment and pharmaceutical industry as a whole, and that a measure has had to be undertaken in order to mitigate unprecedented cynicism. Because prior, if you recall, to the pandemic, companies like Pfizer were regarded with a good deal of suspicion. We're coming off the back of the opioid crisis that revealed that pharmaceutical companies, and in particular Purdue Pharma, put their profits ahead of the well-being and welfare of their customers, were willing to influence, bias, manipulate physicians in order to prescribe medications that they knew were dangerous. That showed us a template that we could have observed at the beginning of this pandemic. Now that that template appears to have been repeated, if not to such an extreme degree, I would say this is a strategy to manage the growing and, I would say, warranted mistrust of an entire industry.
And I think what this study confirmed is pretty much what other smaller studies have said in the past, and that's the following. Number one, vaccines have risks. I think only a fool would say vaccines don't have risks.
Where was that kind of reasoned, balanced conversation at the time? Forgive me if I seem hyperbolic and outraged and evangelical. It simply disgusts me to a degree to see this information now framed in the spaces that were so obedient and compliant and propagandizing during that period, and who contributed to whatever number it was, and, you know, stay tuned, that were detrimentally affected by the propaganda and the unwillingness to have open discourse at the time when it was most relevant.
Dr. Jonathan Cantor, who's an adjunct scholar at the Penn Center for Clinical Epidemiology and Biostatistics, reviewed the study. Cantor says the new research shouldn't erode anyone's trust in the vaccine, but instead prompt them to think about their own personal medical condition.
Oh, think about your own personal. Do you remember how many times you watch dancing, vaccines, musical numbers? This isn't about you. You're socially irresponsible. And when people went, has it been clinically trialed for transmission? You're a conspiracy theorist. Now, where they're getting to is where we were like 2 or 3 years ago. So you stay where you are now, because they'll get here.
And their own need for protection. What do you say to those folks who might have said, hey, we knew the vaccine was dangerous all along? Now here's the proof.
There's no such thing as a drug that has an effect without a side effect. So everything has potential risk. The problem is, what is the risk of the thing that you are trying to prevent? And that's where it comes into play. So for example, if you have for parents, right, if you've got a healthy 3-year-old who's had COVID 4 times already, well, then I'd say, I don't know what the benefit is that you're going to get from getting that vaccine today.
Actually, an even bigger principle than a child that may have natural immunity is this principle: open, reasoned conversation, bodily autonomy, free will, personal sovereignty, open-mindedness, a communal space of mutual trust and mutual respect, instead of propaganda, condemnation, shaming, supporting the agenda of the pharmaceutical industry, taking advantage of an opportunity to assert authoritarianism when it appears now it was not legitimate and it was incorrect. So even though it seems perfectly reasoned now to say, well, if a child's already had it and children aren't dying of COVID, what would be the point? That's what everybody was saying. What they're trying to frame this as now is, oh, there's a small risk of a whole bunch of stuff that people were talking about for ages. But in general, all vaccines, it almost goes without saying. It certainly did go without saying. I remember what they were saying, and more importantly, what they were singing and dancing and propagandizing. And I remember, more importantly, what they were extracting. True information was censored. So it's not like, oh, you know, now we've had a little bit of time, we've done some studies, there may have been a few innocent mishaps along the way. Why did you need legal indemnity at the advent of this then? Why was so much money spent on organizations like Logically AI and various others censoring public voices that were outspoken on this subject?